With this episode, the Pristella City arc of ReZero has officially hit the climax, and so did I when Reinhard took his sword out, because that sword alone has more aura than every episode of Solo Leveling combined. All season, we've been wanting Reinhard to do this, but tragically, the only person who was worthy of it was his own grandmother. Season 3, up until today, had ventured away from the dark emotional storytelling ReZero's known for, and shifted toward a more fight-oriented, action-centric season. But this episode, we witnessed one of the saddest, most painful emotional highlights of the entire series. And yes, this episode made me cry. But not because of Theresia. I cried tears of joy because my queen got 20 seconds of screen time. Pandora showing up at the scene of Theresia's death was totally unexpected, but definitely a welcome sight. Her appearance made Wilhelm's backstory even more tragic now that we know that this whole time he's been blaming himself and his family without knowing that Pandora is really the one responsible for basically all the pain in his life. Potentially the final boss of ReZero, Pandora is the only character that hides her existence from history, meaning we have basically no information about her. It's possible that this whole time she could have been following us around, orchestrating tragedies and manipulating events, and the reason we haven't seen any of that is simply because she's tampering with everyone's memories. Theoretically, Pandora could be in my room right now. In fact, I might go hump the air just in case she's invisible. On a real note, it's insane how they could fit such an emotional roller coaster in just a 5-minute episode. Wilhelm is one of the best side characters of all time, and I just want him to be happy after this. The music and voice acting perfectly captured the emotion in these moments, and if anyone else cried, please let me know in the comments. However, the highlight of the episode for me was unexpectedly the white whale scene. It just felt like I was being fisted by nostalgia. I didn't realize how much I missed this big fat flying fuck. This scene brought me back in time to sitting in my old room watching ReZero Season 1 on my iPhone 5S, probably neglecting my homework, just hoping that Subaru would defeat the white whale, which at the time I thought was the Archbishop of Gluttony. I really didn't know anything, didn't know who Echidnut was yet, so Rem was still my favorite character, and I had no clue how impactful ReZero would eventually become. I was just enjoying the anime without even realizing how much it meant to me, and for some reason, seeing the white whale again triggered all of that. But anyway, there's a lot to talk about this episode. For the first time ever in the anime timeline, Reinhard has unsheathed his weapon, the Dragon Sword. We did see him use it against Puck, but that was just a trial formed by Echidna's imagination, which in my opinion makes it even more canon. But this is officially the first time it's ever happened in the anime, and that's a big deal because the Dragon Sword is more powerful than the Yang Sword that can burn anything its wielder wants, and more powerful than the other 8 swords of power that I can't talk about due to spoilers. It's the strongest weapon in the entire ReZero universe though. It's enchanted with a divine protection from the sword god himself, and it's said to have drank the blood of thousands of dragons and even slain witches and demon gods. And I wish the author would elaborate on what that means. The visual effects and the sound design were fucking amazing though. They absolutely nailed the aura and the gravity of the dragon sword being drawn and really made it seem like the world itself reacted to it. And I cannot stress enough how massively this scene improved upon this chapter of the novel. In the novel, Reinhard didn't even pull the sword out. He just showed up already holding it, so for that, I forgive any and all of the cut content in this episode, which I will talk about soon. Another detail I liked was how you could see Theresia's life flash before us within the swing of the sword. This was almost a perfect scene. I just thought the soundtrack didn't really fit. It's such a beautiful song, but a bit too heroic and happy for a scene where Reinhard kills his own grandmother while her husband and child beg him to stop. And the Dragon Sword is ReZero's equivalent of a nuclear bomb, so this happy, optimistic soundtrack didn't really convey its monstrous and terrifying power. Again, great song, love the song, I just didn't think it made sense in this context. Like, imagine if they played Requiem of Silence during the Priscilla stripping scene. Not gonna lie, that did go kinda hard. Or at least I did. Still, Theresia's sword attack here was stated to be the most perfect attack Wilhelm had ever seen, but it didn't matter because her opponent was Reinhard. When you pair the most powerful person with the most powerful weapon, you just get complete dominance. Despite Theresia being worthy of the sword, as well as the previous owner of the sword, one swing of it was all it took to end the fight before it even started. To put it in perspective how powerful Reinhard and the Dragon Sword truly are, Theresia used to solo armies, and that was standard procedure. Part of the military strategy was just to send Theresia alone to kill the enemy's entire army. Lieutenant Theresia, for today's objective, I want you to go out there and win the war. Single-handedly. And she actually fucking did. Which makes it even more impressive that Wilhelm was able to match her, especially considering the fact that he has no divine protections, no magic, no authorities, no mana flow method. He is literally just a guy with a sword. And despite his age, he was even holding his ground against Theresia right up until Heinkel distracted him and caused him to lose. Heinkel ruins literally everything, and he wasn't always an asshole. Heinkel used to be chill, up until the day his wife Luana, Reinhardt's mother, fell into a coma. That's why Heinkel started drinking and kidnapping lollies and shit. Anyway, the point is, Theresia was an absolute monster on the battlefield, single-handedly ending an entire war, and yet it only took Reinhardt one swing of his sword to kill her. That really put the scale of his power in perspective for me, and frankly, I find it terrifying. Plus, the way he kills Theresia without a shred of remorse or hesitation reminded me of Puck's words from Season 2. "You're a hero, Reinhardt. And a hero is all you'll ever be." Let's talk about Theresia's backstory though. In the novel, Reid Astrea is mentioned as the first-generation sword saint, and it's because of his heroic accomplishments that the Astrea family became a family of swordsmen. Except Theresia had no interest in swordsmanship. In fact, she hated it, and she hated her ancestor Reid Astrea for forcing it upon her family. But the actual reason for that wasn't properly explained in the anime. The anime kind of framed it as Theresia felt guilty for overshadowing her brothers despite all their training and hard work. And I'm sure that was part of it, but the main reason she hated the sword was because of her blessing of the death god. Theresia's blessing was honestly more of a curse, because anytime she cut someone, whether accidentally or on purpose, their wound would never stop bleeding, and that's why Theresia hated swordsmanship. Aside from that, the biggest piece of cut content was when Theresia gained her second blessing, the blessing of the sword saint. In that moment, we were actually supposed to hear the sword god laughing at her. His voice continued to mock her for most of her life, actually, and honestly, I didn't even know there were gods in ReZero. So because Theresia refused to pick up a sword, her uncle and all her brothers died in the war fighting in her place. It wasn't until Wilhelm went off to battle that Theresia finally picked up the sword again to rescue him from being killed by demi-humans. Theresia actually falling in love with Wilhelm was another part of her backstory that was cut from the anime, so basically this meeting between her and Wilhelm became a daily occurrence every morning, and she thought Wilhelm reminded her of a sword in the way that he's so rough and unchanging. But eventually he does change when he falls in love with her and softens up a bit, finally admitting that he doesn't hate flowers anymore. By the way, interesting detail, but this location where Wilhelm and Theresia first met is coincidentally the exact same spot where Felt runs into Reinhardt 50 years later in Season 1, Episode 3. I don't know what that means, but, you know, it kinda sounds like they might fuck. I guess we'll find out in a future season, and hopefully that's a distant future season, because I don't think Reinhardt's immune to diss tracks. So Reinhardt being blamed for Theresia's death, as well as basically all the drama in the Astrea family, was in reality caused by Pandora. Yes, Heinkel is an asshole, but Pandora is the one responsible for Theresia's death, and unfortunately, we are the only ones who know that. A guest appearance by Pandora and Reinhardt unsheathing the Dragon Sword in the same episode almost sounds too good to be true, so let's just take a moment to appreciate how blessed we are. This episode was a 10 out of 10, best episode of the season so far, etc. Also, these videos are just my first impressions, by the way, and my opinions do change frequently, so honestly, the soundtrack from the Dragon Sword scene is already growing on me. As you can probably tell, I've been using it constantly throughout this video. I think maybe I went too heavy with the criticism earlier, but I'm leaving that in the video simply because that was my genuine first impression. After watching the scene over and over though, I've actually started to like the song choice. I think initially I was just expecting something more along the lines of Ludwig's theme from Bloodborne or something. One last fun fact before I go. When the author first dropped this chapter, he was surprised at everyone's approval of Reinhardt killing Theresia, because apparently he intended for us to hate Reinhardt after this episode. Anyway, that's all I got. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and I'll see you next week. Thanks everyone for watching. Until next time, keep talking about ReZero. I'm out for now. Peace.